Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, April 13th, 2023. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Brew Cabin's Matt Giovanisci entered two of the beers we've formulated on this show into a local competition. How did he do? We'll bring in Chris Colby of Beer and Gardening Journal to help us interpret the results. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and many thanks to everybody who's stepping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Steve Wilkes and I are now steam juicers. Steve had a couple of quarts of frozen mulberries, and we tried our first run with the steam juicer that I bought after our chat with Tim Lieber. How did that go? Well, if you're an upper-tier supporter on Patreon, you'll see a video that Steve and I shot documenting the process. We had a lot of fun and learned a lot. I'll post that to Patreon this Friday. We also shot a video episode while we were waiting for the water to boil. We shot the video episode on my two box, the one with the wrong ingredient and the one with the right. The wrong ingredient thing was an accident, but it turned out to be a fun experiment. And financial supporters will see that episode first, along with the recipe and the behind-the-scenes video for upper-tier supporters. I'll be sending those beers out to Matt and Chris for their thoughts this week. Steve is planning on using the mulberry juice that we collected for a mead, and I want to juice some fruit for a beer. At first, I was thinking about a strawberry cream ale, but Susan says she'd rather have blackberry instead, so I'm probably going to get some frozen blackberries from the store and juice them in the steam juicer. The beer that I brewed to go along with that fruit is a cream ale. In fact, it's a kit for Desiree Cream Ale from our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave from HighGravityBrew.com. It was so easy to order ingredients the other day for my second brewing of the Hellesbach that I decided to order this beer from them as well. Lazy? Yes, but I also wanted to send some support back toward HighGravityBrew.com since they've been nothing but supportive for a way long time. When I ordered the kit from HighGravityBrew.com, I was asked whether I wanted extract or all grain, whether I wanted my grains milled or whole, and I was asked if I was brewing brew in a bag because they add a bit of extra base malt to compensate for efficiency. I was kind of skeptical of that. I'm like, I don't need that. But I'm glad I did get the extra grain because my original gravity was spot on. Turns out Desiree and Dave know what they're doing. I was also given the choice of which yeast I wanted, and of course, I chose Imperial Flagship, which arrived nice and cold in an insulated bag with a cold pack. So whether you're getting one of High Gravity's awesome kits or you're using your own recipe with the Build Your Own Beer page on HighGravityBrew.com, the folks at HighGravityBrew.com will treat you right. And if you're in the market for awesome Warthog electric brewing gear, use the code EBC75BB to save $75. That's at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. Okay, the recipe development series has gone from looking at individual ingredients to building recipes from scratch to brewing those beers, and now a couple of those beers have been to competition. Chris Colby and I go over the results with the brewer, Matt Giovanisci. Matt Giovanisci, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks for having me.
This is centered around you, so I'm introducing you first, but we're bringing into the mix our fellow recipe development series participant, Chris Colby. Welcome back, Chris.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me on the show.
So start us out, Matt. I mean, why are we here? I'll just give you
Why are we here?
I'll just give you the burden.
Why is anyone here? Yeah. The first two recipes that we developed on Basic Brewing Radio that I had a chance to brew, that was my turn to brew, there was a local competition going on that I was asked to steward, which I didn't do, but I decided, you know what? I have these two beers on tap that we did. I'm going to send them in and it was very easy for me to do, and I've never entered a beer into a competition before ever. And I felt comfortable because it wasn't all on me. It was you and I. So
share the blame.
Yeah. So if the scores are bad, of course my brewing would be to blame, but then also part of the recipe as well. So
Thanks.
And that's not true. That's not true. But that's the bit I tell myself to feel better. But yeah, so I sent these beers in, and I didn't have to mail them because it was a local competition. It was the Peak to Peak Pro-Am 2023 in Colorado, and I got the score sheets back, and I would like to go over them. And this is the first time I've ever seen a score sheet or read one. So I'm curious what a lot of this means. I didn't really understand the scoring system, but I would like to know, now that we have this and we have BJCP judges looking at these beers and evaluating them, what we could do to change these recipes that we originally developed to maybe make them better. And I guess the bigger question of it all is, are we trying to make them better for us, or are we trying to make them better to win?
Yeah. That's the question. And, because I had both of these beers, a triple and an American Amber Ale. Steve and I both shared them on the video podcast. They were wonderful. I thought that they were really, really good beers. But Chris Colby, I'm poking a beehive here. You're an experienced beer judge. You've judged competitions. Give us the good, the bad, and the ugly about competitions. What's your opinion of the whole competition process?
Competitions are fun. I used to enter them quite a bit, and I've judged at I don't know how many, lots and lots. And they're fun, but I would never, as a brewer, I would never put too much weight on any one. Like you submit a beer, you get a score. Like I would not take that as like that's my measure as a brewer, because you get beer. Brewing contests are judged by human beings, and they're judged by human beings who generally had a few beers by that point. Just the logistics of competitions are such that you typically a pair of judges, sometimes a pair will do a bunch of different ones, or sometimes they'll just reassign you. But generally, you're on more than one judge panel. You go through more than one flight of beer, just because recruiting enough judges, there's just no way you could recruit enough judges so that everyone had like 5 beers and their palate was at their peak and they weren't influenced by alcohol and that sort of stuff. So it's a mixed bag, and you get people who, and judges are a mixed bag too. There's some people with very good palates. There's some people with very good palates in some particulars. Like some people, like one thing, I can pick out diacetyl like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's both good and bad. As a brewer, it's good because I can, I know if I'm doing something and I get a little bit of diacetyl. But as a judge, it's maybe less good because I can pick up diacetyl, whereas maybe the average person didn't. And so some people are sensitive and some people are oversensitive to certain things. And then there's if you go online wherever brewers are discussing homebrew contests, there's a whole litany of complaints people have, and then they're pretty much right in all respect. There's some judges that judge a beer according to like a single example. Like, it used to be the ESB category, which they don't have the ESB, but everyone judged that, or not everyone, but many judges judge that as how close is this to Fuller's ESB, even though it's sort of explicitly, if I remember right, explicitly said in the guidelines, don't take any single beer as the avatar of that, or not avatar, but the shining example of that style.
Gold standard, yeah.
And so if you submit a dry stout that's not like Guinness, some judges are just gonna oh, this is not a Guinness. Others take a broader, it's a mixed bag.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's fun though. If you enter enough beers, you win medals. I mean, unless if you can brew beer without just glaring faults, it's just a bit of a crapshoot. Um, you know, you. In fact, there's a brewer in my club who won the national homebrew contest that year just because he entered like 60 beers, and they were all
Yeah.
decent, but
Yeah.
it was just
Numbers game.
yeah. And I don't know, like my own after judging a lot, like I'd say two things shape my opinion of contests. Uh, one as a entrant and one as a judge. And as an entrant, I remember one time I brewed an American Pale Ale. It was sort of a Sierra Nevada clone, pretty much, that. And what I did was on the day of the contest, I took the beer of mine and I took the Sierra Nevada, poured them into identical glasses and got out a score sheet and wrote out my own like interpretation of what's going on in this beer. And at the time, my interpretation was that my beer was reasonably close to Sierra Nevada, but it was too hoppy, like in regards to the style, but it was just too much hops. And when I got the score sheet back, in big block letters, sort of like a child had done it almost, it said, "Where's the hops?" That was the only comment on the score sheet. And so, as an intern, I was like, well, there was more hops in that beer than the actual sort of, one of the flagships, or one of the, standard beers for that. And then on the other side of it, in judging so many times, I know that one of a major thing, and judges talk about it amongst themselves, is just palate fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
If you judge a flight of hoppy beers, the first couple, like, oh, the hops of this are nice, and this is decent. But then later on, it's like, I'm not getting much hops out of this. This doesn't smell as, you start getting burned out on especially the major aspects of the style. Smoke beers are notorious for that. At the end of a smoke beer flight, you can't tell if there's smoke, or a lot of judges will claim, "Oh yeah, I can. I don't know," but long story short, contests are fun. They're fun for the entrants. They're fun for the judges. You can learn things, but they're not judged by robots.
And I think, Matt, you said, maybe we can figure out how to make my beers better.
Mm-hmm.
These judges are not necessarily, they're judging to a standard. They're judging to a style. And it may not be that your beer was, quote unquote, bad in any way. And in fact, none of the judges found any flaws in your beers at all.
Right.
At the bottom it says judge did not, select any descriptors as flaws. So these were, quote unquote, flawless beers, but they're being judged against a standard. And so if we change these beers, if we change these recipes, they are going to be different. Are they going to be better? They may be closer to that style descriptor, but they may not necessarily be better depending on your preferences. Is that right, Chris?
Yes. I was reading the score sheets.
Yeah.
You said, yes, and James, that's correct.
That's all I ask. Just blanket agreement. But does that make sense, Matt?
Yeah. So I actually, when I looked at these score sheets, and we'll go over them, I agreed with everything. But I feel like I'm the harshest critic, and I could have really beat these beers up if and I usually try to do that. But yeah, I agree with every single comment, and I think a lot of it too. It may not even be a recipe change. It may be, I have some ideas on how I would fix these beers, quote unquote, if I were going to resubmit them to a competition.
Yeah.
But I'm not necessarily sure I would fix them again, quote unquote, for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's my point.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd both of these beers were lovely. I just really liked them a lot. And why don't we start out with the amber ale, just to start, to get from the abstract into the, something more concrete. Why don't we start with the recipe for the amber ale? Talk about the recipe that we came up with.
So the amber ale is 9 pounds, or about 90% of Maris Otter, a pound or about 10% of Caramel 60, Crystal 60. I believe I used Caramel 60 Brice. And then about 2% or 3 ounces of chocolate malt. And that was the malt bill. That was pretty simple. And then for hops, we did 2 ounces of Cascade at 60 minutes, 1 ounce of Cascade at 10, and 1 ounce of Centennial at 10. And then for our yeast, we used a pack of Imperial A07 Flagship. And then on top of that, I guess, or even before all of that, the water chemistry, we started with RO water and it was a pretty balanced or semi-balanced, I guess, about 4.7 grams of calcium chloride, 4.6 grams of canning salt, or kosher salt I used, 3.4 grams of Epsom salt, and 3.7 grams of gypsum. And then some World Flock, sack rest at 150, conditioned it did primary fermentation at 68 degrees for about 7 days, and then kegged it.
And it was delicious. I can testify.
Yeah, and that was the second time I had brewed that beer. So this is a recipe. This is the first recipe I think we developed on the show, and this was the second batch that I had brewed of it because I liked it so much the first time that I brewed it again when my dad was in town.
Now, both of these, I guess this is a spoiler, but both of these beers got combined scores of 34, which I think is really good. Is that a good score, Chris?
Yeah. Yep.
Because it feels not like a good score, especially out of 50. I'm like, well that's a C.
You're not going to get a 50.
Right.
I've very rarely seen, a lot of scores above above 40, really. Or, the good beers tend to, and unless there's been very recently some inflation, tend to be in the high 30s, and very respectable beers between 30 and 35. 34 is it's a beer though. There's no, there's no diacetyl, there's no, phenolic off flavors. There's no, there's nothing wrong with it. And in addition, it's, at least in the ballpark of, and probably in the infield of, mimicking the style.
Let's go through the score sheets. Let's start with, I guess, because I can't remember which order they came in, but let's start with Judge Phillip, who is a master, or certified judge and a master. Is that a master? MHP 2023 master. Let's start with aroma. He gave, out of 12 points, he gave it 7. This American Amber Ale. Comments: malt toasty, yeast character clean, appearance a 3 out of 3, so that's good. Comments: head texture, coarse bubbles, tiny bubbles, drops to a low ring of large bubbles. So you got okay. Flavor 12 out of 20. Comments: malt toasty, hop flavor herbal. Hop flavor is a bit indistinct. For an American Amber, I would expect more piney or New World hop character. Yeast character clean. So that was useful feedback. Mouthfeel 5 out of 5. It says astringency from hops. Overall 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 overall. That's pretty dang good. A very good example of the style. The hop character is a bit indistinct. Consider changing the hop bill to bring up the piney, citrusy, or New World hop character. Could be that this beer is showing its age with the loss of hop flavor. A very drinkable and enjoyable beer. I think I would be really happy with that score.
Yeah, I was happy with it.
And his total was 35.
And yeah, I find it interesting what when I think of New World hops, would you put Cascade in that? I would, right?
That's a good.
And certainly for an American amber ale, you know,
New World meaning
I mean, how new of
North
a world
America?
are we in?
Exactly.
Yeah. Because it's like, yeah, we could have done. I mean, we could have done Galaxy and Motueka and all the other New World, quote unquote, right? But I don't think that would have worked.
But the category is American amber ale.
Yeah, right.
So.
Oh yeah, I just picked two Australian, Australian, New Zealand. Yeah. Or like Amarillo or I guess Citra. You know, I don't know if I would have picked those hops, honestly.
Yeah. The second judge, his name was John. He's a certified judge. Aroma, 8 out of 12. Malt, grainy. Hops, minty. Yeast character, clean. Okay for style. American hop aroma and caramel malt notes are absent. Appearance, 3 out of 3. Head texture, coarse bubbles. Flavor, 13 out of 20. Comments, hop flavor, earthy. Hop flavor, grassy. Malt, grainy. Malt caramel, low. Fruity, berry. Base grain flavors come through, but the caramel toasty flavors are absent. Mouthfeel, 3 out of 5. Alcohol warmth, clean. This body is a bit low for the style. Carbonation is a bit low as well. Overall, 6 out of 10. Comments, the base grain comes through, but some of the flavor specialty malts are lost, perhaps due to oxidation muting the flavors. I might suggest a different hop variety to something more along the lines of American hops. And the judge total was 33 out of 50. But again, neither, selected any flaws. So, it was. So, Chris, would you be happy with these this feedback on if this were one of your beers?
Well, I would ignore it because I don't. But I mean, one thing I would note is look at the overall scores. One is a 6 and one is an 8. That's a pretty big jump, really, when you think about 60% versus 80%.
Yeah.
Of the total and and also I mean, I would be curious to try the beer and is the aroma, is the caramel malt really gone a pound in that much, or is the guy's palate shot? It could be, but given there are no other faults, especially none related, like that would come up with contamination, which would also sort of mute that. It just makes me wonder. There's another thing to worry about when of course, you delivered it to the, but if you ship it, then you always have to, did it get cooked? Especially if, when I would enter contests in the summer from Texas, it was like, how many billions of degrees is this beer going to be, subjected to on the truck on the way there? But I mean, the scores on this are decent, and I think you can see that there's significant disagreement in the judges, which shows you there's an amount of subjectivity there, and the fact that in both cases you got over 30.
Do you get I mean, I've judged a couple 3 competitions, and I found myself like going through each of the category, and I'm not a good judge, but I'm not even going to pretend. But I would go through the the individual categories there, and then add it up at the end and say, come up with like a 38 and go, well, wait a minute, this beer's not as good as a 38, and then shave off some of the, do you find some people doing that as well?
Oh, everyone. Yeah. I mean, cause also, I mean, the 2 judges are going to, or if there's just 2 judges on the panel, they're going to discuss their scores a little bit, and they're generally going to say, someone's going to say, oh, I gave this a 10 out of 12 on aroma, and other judge, are you crazy? It doesn't. And then, well, I guess I can come down a couple points on that, and so they work things out so that the judges, and you're supposed to, so that you're not, so that one score sheet isn't 12 and the others 48, because then you would then you'd be like, what in the So there's some and overtly, and that's not hidden in any way. There is some collusion in judging and trying to, and also I've judged with a lot of uh, very sharp judges, guys who didn't really know. And a lot of times if I write down something and they make a good argument, I'm like, okay, yeah, I actually feel good about either coming up a couple points or going down because I see what you're saying now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not all bad. It's not all, although it can get to as you would expect, if there's a very opinionated judge and a meeker judge, then suddenly everything just becomes the dominant judge's opinion.
Right.
But usually, it's as you would expect of picking any two people to do something. Sometimes you're going to get two people who work together, and sometimes you can, more one's going to, basically do the work and tell the other one what to do.
Now, do you in looking at these two score sheets, is there anything that stands out that you might recommend that Matt do on a rebrew? Based on their feedback, assuming that they're not palate fatigued, and assuming that they know what they're talking about. Are there suggestions that you would make, some changes to the recipe to make the judges happier next time?
Well, it's hard to think of them when you use Cascade hops and someone says you should use American hops. It's like,
right.
Last I checked my Atlas, all the regions that grow Cascade are in the U.S.
Right.
Well, actually, New Zealand grows some, but yeah. My biggest, and this sort of reinforces what I said earlier. My biggest hint to people entering contests is don't brew a great example of the style, brew a caricature of the style. If you're brewing an IPA, make it super hoppy. You're not gonna if you enter a IPA and it's sort of your IBUs are in the middle of the range, your score sheets are going to say no hops, no hops, no hops. You gotta at least bump it up on something like that. Bump it up like 20% over the top of that, because you need the brewers or the judges are drinking, a series of these in a row, and you need something to stand out to grab their attention, and to get a good score, you need that thing to be what's the hallmark of the style. And
right.
I mean, it varies, because like I remember I used to brew lambics, and that's the sort of lambics I brewed were more in the Cantillon style, where it's sort of intensely sour, but there's not a lot of funk. But the judges here in Texas were always hung up on no baby diaper, no, that's what they judged on, how funky it was, how much horse blanket and like that. And so you've got to pick what the first what the score or the guidelines indicate is what's this category about, and it also helps to know sort of just the culture. If you judge a couple contests, you'll pretty much get to know that. So make for this one, and for a balanced style, it becomes harder because an amber ale is supposed to be a nice balanced beer. You can't if you put too much, say, caramel malt in it, that's not really making the beer more like an amber ale. It's just making it more chewy. And if you make it hoppier, it's not supposed to be a super hoppy beer. So yeah, that's how to improve that. I would say just enter it in 30 different contests and you'll win a few, and a couple you'll be told that you can't brew, and
right.
That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I the thing that came to mind for me was just I should have sent it in earlier if I could have. So I feel like this style, or at least this particular beer, suffered because of how old it was. It had been sitting in the keg. I mean, it was super clear. I mean, I think the mention of the caramel malts kind of like falling off, I agree. I don't think it was because of oxidation, because I can tell you at least from a packaging perspective. I filled these off the keg on a tap cooler, which was a actual, pressure counter pressure bottle filler. I feel like it was, it could have been oxidized in the keg, I guess, but it was pretty good coming out. So I tasted it, before I sent it in. It's just old, and I think that's also why the hops fell off as well. So I think for this particular beer, I probably wouldn't change the recipe at all. I would have just brewed it with fresher. I would have brewed it fresher ingredients, Papa John's, whatever the saying is. I think that's. I'm not sure if I would. Same thing, Chris. I wouldn't necessarily increase the caramel malt because I think that would make it too sweet. I think I wouldn't. You could maybe bump up the late edition hops a bit. Maybe if you wanted to just have the hops jump out of the glass, just to kind of what you were saying about having sort of like the hallmark piece of it. But I don't know. I mean, Cascade and Super Cascade, 2 ounces at the very end, hop stand, 10 minutes. I guess it could have added another ounce of something in there.
It was a way good beer. And I think the score reflects that. I mean, even if it was a little old, I would have been, real happy with these scores and the comments. I mean,
I agree with all of it.
Yeah, I mean, if the comments would have said, tastes like, DMS or tastes diacetyl, or then I think you'd worry, have to worry that you were doing something wrong as a brewer.
Yeah.
But I think it's good feedback, and I think that it's a good score. There's nothing to be ashamed of, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One thing I'm noticing, I'm looking at two things that I'm noticing. One of these judges I seems to give much better feedback, and you got the higher score from him. But also, if you look on the overall, they list 3 components: style match, enjoyment, and quality. And your beer got high marks in quality and enjoyment, but then just a little bit lower on style. So, I mean, for me, that'd be great because we don't have to go into it, but not a slave to beer styles. But yeah, I would. I mean, this would and also given what I expect from homebrew contests, these would be 2 score sheets that I would say, yeah, that's what I expected, and pretty good. 35, I'd take it.
Yeah, the enjoyment scale was much further toward wonderful than lifeless. So I guess
in both cases, and the quality, flaws versus flawless, was the first judge was about halfway, and the other one was higher.
And the judge that gave it the higher score said could be that this beer is showing its age with a loss of hop flavor, and I think it was 100% right.
The Desiree Cream Ale kit that I brewed the other day and fermented with A07 Flagship from our friends and sponsors at Imperial Yeast is about ready to keg. The beer started at around 1050, so I didn't use a starter. I had a very healthy-looking fermentation, pretty quick, and I have confidence that the beer is going to taste great. I like to say that my stir plate is dusty because I don't use it anymore to make starters for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches. I did make starters with the previous 2 beers. That's because they were higher in gravity, and I fermented at lager temperature with the seasonal yeast L09 Que Bueno. And true to its name, the Que Bueno created some cervezas muy buenos. Both beers fermented, thanks Duolingo, both beers fermented very clean and quickly. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. Even the one with the wrong ingredients came out nicely, although not as nicely as the proper one, I have to say. Those 200 billion cells in that easy-to-open package made short work of the 2-liter starter, and the starter dregs got to work in a hurry in those big beers. Ask your local homebrew store about L09 Que Bueno from Imperial Yeast, and check them out at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com. Well, we're ready to move on to the triple.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interesting one because, we'll go over the. I have some thoughts.
Okay,
but talk about the recipe for this one.
All right, so this one was 12 pounds or about 80%, I'll say 77%, Dingemans pills, and 1 pound of flaked wheat at about 6.5%, and 8 ounces of aromatic malt at about 3%. And then I also added 1 pound of Belgian candy syrup, specifically the Simplicity, the clear one, and 1 pound of honey. For the hop schedule, it was 2.5 ounces of Sots at 60 minutes, and then 2.5 ounces of Sots again at 5 minutes, both at about 3.5% IBUs, or sorry, 3.5% alpha acids. And then water chemistry for this one, I believe I also kept it pretty balanced. I did about a gram of baking soda, probably didn't even need that, 4.2 grams of calcium chloride, about a gram of canning salt, 2.6 grams of Epsom salt, 2.7 grams of gypsum salt, and I did about 5 milliliters of lactic acid to bring the pH to, I think I had the mash pH at around 5.31. And then I pitched, and this is where I think I'm just going to call it out early. This is where the trouble came in. I pitched 2 packages of Imperial's B48 triple double in a yeast starter.
In a 2-liter yeast starter.
In a 2-liter yeast starter.
For a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch.
Yes, and I pitched it at 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and I let it free rise up to 75 degrees Fahrenheit over the course of about a week, and then bottled half of it and kegged the other half. And what I sent them was a keg fill, not a bottle conditioned beer.
So let's start with and again, the combined total again on this beer was 34.
Mm-hmm.
The first judge that I'm going to talk about, Judge Chris, no relation to the Chris we got online, gave an 8 out of 12 on aroma. The comments were cracker malt, honey in the malt, spicy for the hops, apricot for fruity, and then grape as well for fruity. Appearance, 2 out of 3. The head texture is coarse bubbles. The flavor, 15 out of 20. Comments, malt biscuit, cracker, hop flavor, spicy, yeast character, banana, fruity apricot, and fruity lemon. Mouthfeel, 4 out of 5. Dry finish from alcohol and carbonic bite. Overall, 7 out of 10. Pleasant malt aroma and flavor, but a bit sweet for the style. May want to cut back on malts or substitute with an adjunct to lighten the body. Could also use more yeast esters for complexity. Overall, a nice example of the style. And again, no flaws. And the judge's total was 36 out of 50 there. Judge Paul gave 6 out of 12 for aroma. Woo. Comments, malt, caramel, cracker, grainy. The yeast character was clove, and the malt, he detected a honey malt character. Appearance, 2 out of 3. Texture, tiny bubbles. Flavor, 13 out of 20. Yeast character, clove, malt, cracker. Finish should be drier, and there should be more yeast character. Mouthfeel, 4 out of 5. Surprisingly creamy with nice carbonation despite the quickly disappearing head. Overall, 7 out of 10. A very drinkable beer, but this probably should have fermented out more for a drier character and more yeast flavors. I could tell there was Belgian yeast character, but not enough of it. Judge total 32 out of 50. So a couple of those comments might have been yeast driven there.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe if you'd stressed out the yeast and not pitched dang much of it,
Yep.
might have been. And then they both said it was a little sweet, which I wonder if that had something to do with the honey that you added in there as well. You know, sometimes honey can be dry. If you taste meads, sometimes a mead can be super dry, but it can taste sweet because that honey flavor characteristic is there. Again, I liked this beer a lot, and Steve and I both liked the beer a lot. So whether it measured up to, if we were holding it up to the style descriptor or not. I don't know. But what do you think of those of that feedback, Chris?
Yeah, the one thing, okay, in both cases, yeah, there's a sweetness, and I agree they might be conflating a honey aroma with actual sweetness. Um, Another thing you mentioned, it was a keg fill.
Yeah.
If you had more carbonation, that would make it seem drier. And so, uh,
Hmm.
just I mean, and I don't know. Some people are pretty good at doing a bottle fill and actually getting a lot of carbonation in it. But if you use a counter pressure and you know
Get
are
cranked
holding
up a
on it
bit.
so it doesn't bounce off your ceiling when you let go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, both the overall was 7 out of 10 in both cases, and
Mhm.
again, the enjoyment and quality scores were high. It was, well, from one of the judges, the style was the lowest, and the other was tied for the lowest. So, or it looks like they all sort of were tied. But yeah, that's not a bad score sheet. And if you were looking to like, I'm going to enter this contest next year and do better, maybe get rid of the honey in the recipe and pitch less yeast, although
Mhm.
somehow end up with a drier beer. Let it you let it the temperature climb, which is a standard thing for a lot of Belgian yeasts. So yeah, you could let it climb a little higher, or you could maybe go with a little more sugar in the formulation. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're just getting 34, you're in the ballpark, and the comments weren't like, oh, there's some horrible off flavor. It was, there should be more Belgian yeast character, and there should be a little bit drier. Those are
Yeah.
tweaks, something to change a little bit, not a fundamental, like error. I would probably get rid of the melanoidin malt.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
I like the honey character of the beer. Maybe if you switched out that pound of honey or 450 grams of honey with another pound of the candy syrup,
Mhm.
and did 2 pounds of that instead of one of honey and one of the candy syrup, maybe that would have the desired result as far as fitting what these judges' impressions of the style is. But I don't know that it would make it better. In that
Well,
regard, because I liked that honey character. Steve and I both commented on, I can taste the honey.
yeah, and I was actually shocked by that because I could taste it too. I can't imagine the honey stuck around, but because I added it during the end of the boil, so
Mm.
it wasn't like it was a late addition in the fermenter, which is what I said when we talked about this on the show. I said that I would have done it differently. I would have added the liquid sugar later after it had a chance to start fermenting. Another thing, there's a lot that I kind of would change here. I think both in terms of the recipe itself and the style or the process, and I would have. Yeah, I liked the honey too. I'm surprised people tasted it, but and maybe that came from something else. But I would definitely ditch the aromatic malt. I don't think we needed it to be there at all. I would have done later additions of those liquid sugars. I would have probably not. I didn't mention this when I said the recipe, but I did a step mash. So I did a beta rest at 148 for 45 minutes, and then did a alpha rest at 158 for 30. I probably would skip that. I probably just do a single infusion at 148 the whole time, which probably could have helped it dry out a little bit more. And then I would have done one packet of yeast, and
And maybe
I was just
maybe no starter.
no. Yeah, I was afraid in that case. I was afraid it wouldn't ferment all the way out because we were dealing with such a high gravity beer, and I just was. To me, I thought it was an insurance policy, but I think I mentioned I had a blow off cane on that particular batch, and it was all over my floor the next day. It was so active. So yeah, I think I would have dialed back I would have added the liquid sugar later, even to quell that from happening. And again, I'm surprised if the honey flavor came from the actual honey. And I'm surprised it didn't ferment all the way out, because this beer was a 10-10. It finished at 10-10. So not super dry by any means, but not super sweet, but it definitely tastes sweet.
Now
I can't tell if it's perceived or if it's legit sugar.
Right. Well, like I said, the honey can, in some meads or in a lot of meads, the honey can ferment out. It can be a dry, it can go like 0.998 and still have a perception of being sweet, because of the honey character. I did read a brewlosophy experiment, I think today, where they added honey in the boil in one batch.
Oh, that was today.
And then they added honey in the fermenter at another batch, and they couldn't tell the difference. Nobody could tell.
Yeah, right.
So, as far as I know, you're probably talking, or you're more talking about fermentation character or fermentation performance and not character of the flavor. But if that's any indication, as far as the flavor is concerned, it might not make a difference whether you add it to the boil or the fermenter.
Yeah, and we could ditch the honey and just go with the candy syrup. I don't know. I guess I kind of like the honey too, but I personally thought it was too sweet. And I had tasted before we even developed that recipe. I went out and bought like a ton of triples. That was a fun week.
Or so you were told.
And yeah, yeah. And I remember all the American styles were friggin' sweet. Sweet. And I didn't like it. I really wanted it to be dry and bitter. And not too bitter, but I just wanted that. I don't know. I preferred that when I was drinking the triples. So I was a little disappointed when it came out sweet to me, even after the fact that it fermented like a ravenous, beast, I guess. I don't know. I was shocked that it came out that way, but yeah, I would change the recipe, and I would change the process for sure to make that better.
My suggestion on a recipe would be, sometimes simplicity is golden. Like, I was lucky enough to go to Belgium and be in some Belgian breweries, and like, from what I could tell, the recipe for triple in the breweries that made it was pale malt and sucrose.
Yeah,
they didn't spend money on a fancy Belgian candy sugar. I saw just 50 stacks of 50 pound sucrose, and and pale malt, and so it's something like triple. So a simple malt bill will really do you well. And then just like what I would do is run through one of those pitching indicators, like, and how much ale yeast should you pitch? And then I dial it back to about 3/4 of that.
Just to stress out the yeast a bit and get more character.
They won't be like super stressed at that point, especially if you make a yeast start and have an active culture hitting that. And then, like you did, which was the right thing to do, is let the temperature climb a bit during the fermentation. And those combinations things should give you pretty much a dead on, Belgian triple.
Do they stagger the additions, or they do it all in one?
Oh, commercial brewers always do everything easy, especially old school ones. Right. If newer ones, sometimes do.
Well, I thought about the yeast pitching calculators. I brewed twice this Hellesbach, which was started at 1070, and it's a lager, fermenting at 57 degrees Fahrenheit, or around 14 C. And so I said, I'm going to make a starter this time because I want to make sure that I have plenty of yeast to do this lager, this high gravity lager. So I I found some online pitching rate calculators, and they said that starting with 200 billion cells, I should make a 2-liter starter and then step it up 2 more times with 2 liters. I was like, what? And so I made a 2-liter starter, and I pitched that. I pitched the dregs of that, and I hit it with this is like 10 o'clock in the morning. I hit it with a minute of oxygen. By like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that sucker was, there was yeast flying around like a snow globe. The airlock was, and so to me, it would have been crazy to step up that 2-liter starter 2 more times to get to the numbers of cells that these online yeast pitching calculators wanted me to have.
Also, yeah, nobody steps up starters that many times. I mean,
Right.
Because it's usually a 1 to 20 step every time. So 2 liters goes to 5 gallons. If you're going to step it up 2 more times, it would be next 20 gallons and then 100 gallons, and then to pitch for a 5-gallon batch.
Well, that's what they recommended. I mean, to get the recommended number of cells for this 5-gallon 1070 wort, it said, here's the number of cells you want. And then, in order to get them, this is how you do it. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And I'm just wondering if I needed a starter at all with that with that fresh pack of imperial yeast. But I wanted a clean lager, and I didn't want to have any stuck fermentation or anything like that. And the beers came out good, and Chris will find out, because I'm going to send you some, and I might might send Matt some too. just
I'm trying to think of what you would do. I mean, we talked about what would you do to make a better triple, but I'm trying to think of what you would do to make a more contest winning triple.
Yeah, right.
I think they seem to be focused on dryness and the Belgian character. I mean, I think I would try to I would do 3 things. I would try to make a drier beer, more of that Belgian yeast character, not completely blown out, but more. And then I would also just make it take the the top level of the how high alcohol do they want it, and I'd bump it up by like about 10%. Because
I would have
in a triple, you don't want yours to be like the one. Well, this one doesn't have any alcohol in it.
Right.
You don't want to be that guy in the lineup. I mean, you can't overdo it. Although this is a quadruple.
Yeah, and the flaked wheat. I forget why the hell we did that, but I'm like, I don't know if that added anything to it either.
I think maybe it was for mouthfeel. Maybe that's a problem. One of the problems. Maybe you take
maybe that was one of. Exactly.
And plus you had a poop ton of it. I think is what you.
I have a lot of wheat. Yeah. So much wheat.
So much wheat.
I'm never buying it in 55-pound bags again.
Unless you get a horse.
I'm just gonna be making just all wheat beers for the next year.
Well, to wrap it up, if we're ready to wrap it up, Matt, I think when you texted me the results, I could sense some disappointment at the time you got your score sheets. That's
incorrect.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's what texting does for you.
That's exactly. Yeah. No, I agreed with everything. So to me, I was just like, I'm what I was actually happy about was that they didn't suck, and or they weren't flawed in some way, which I didn't think they were.
No, we knew that.
But yeah, it was. I found it validating personally because I thought, I agree with all of this, and I know exactly. I feel like I know what I would change. Although, this particular beer, the triple, it's definitely a recipe. It needed to be. I think the simplification of it is, making the recipe simpler and the process maybe even a little bit more, by, cutting back on the yeast and doing all those things, I think would have made for a better showing, at least for the style. But yeah, I was happy with this. I just didn't know, it's funny because again, I'm looking at, I think if I had any level of disappointment, it was the number out of the number, right? It's 32. It's the 35 out of 50. Cause I'm like, if I'm in school, I failed. You know, so I, not knowing that, but then it was like, oh, when you look at all the comments, I'm like, yeah, I agree with all of it.
Are you gonna compete again?
If it's as easy as that was, yeah. I mean, that was. I got lucky because I got an email from a friend, and because I was a steward at one of these competitions before the Pandy, and that was super fun. I actually had a blast doing that. And so he wanted to see if I wanted to do it again. And I was like, oh, well, it's my homebrew shop where I have to drop these bottles off at. So I'm like, oh, well, that's easy enough. Fill them off the tap. I had them ready to go. Made 4 bottles. You know what the hardest part was? The software.
Huh.
Dealing with the Reggie beer was really difficult for me, I guess. I found that to be the most challenging part.
Back when I entered, there wasn't any software.
Yeah.
My results that I got back are handwritten.
Yeah, I would have preferred a little bit more analog. But yeah, other than that, I probably will. But I'm not competitive. So, it had to be a reason like this, doing it for content, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
That gave me a good enough reason to do it. But if it's just for me, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
And Chris, I appreciate your help in helping us to make sense of all this stuff and get some perspective.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's what you're here for. And you were pretty nice to the or at least you weren't mean to the BJCP. So
I know.
Are you feeling okay?
Losing my touch, I guess. No, it's just, I mean, me, I'm not averse to saying off-color things sometimes when I shouldn't. But no, I mean, it's like, and also like, again, 34 is a good score. Like if you're thinking about it percentage-wise, like, 90% and that's an A and 80%, that's just not how it works. There's very few, at least in my experience in the contest I've judged in, there's very few beers that get 90% of the points or 80% of the points.
Mm-hmm.
There's sort of I would say, and I don't know, this A may have changed and B, like I never did an actual, graph of it at the time, but I would say the scores peak at maybe like if you did a histogram, like the median score would be like around 30. And there'd be some get lower and some get higher, but there's a fat middle. And I would say, and this would be actually interesting. I'm sure somebody has the data on this, but it'd be interesting to see like what is the average and the median score in a BJCP contest.
Mm-hmm.
My guess would be some in the ballpark of 30.
Well, this has been fun. Even though we didn't have the beer, it would have been more fun if we'd had the beers to sample. But maybe next time.
Definitely next time.
All right, guys. Well, it's always fun to get together with you guys individually, and here we are all together. So I look forward to the next time. Well, thanks again to Matt of Brew Cabin. That's brewcabin.com and the Brew Cabin YouTube channel. And Chris Colby of beerandgardeningjournal.com. Matt Giovanisci has shot a video of the next beer, his Dark Mild, so be on the lookout for that. Subscribe to his Brew Cabin channel on YouTube to be notified when that's out. I should have samples of that beer in hand by the end of the week. I'm really looking forward to tasting that. In the meantime, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com. Or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. So until next time, until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.